Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. Kat is still recovering from an attack of the plague, but Skyblaze, our other co-host, is with us tonight. Skyblaze, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm in the joys of having to look for a new goddamn house.
Ooh, that doesn't sound good. What happened there?
My landlords have decided to sell the building. Thanks for that.
Ooh, yeah, that's never fun. That's never fun.
But such is life.
Indeed, indeed. And Brian, how are you doing this week?
Well, I'm a little bit on the ragged side from work, but otherwise in good spirits.
Okay, and apparently, if your manner of speech is any indication, you've been enjoying some British television lately.
I wasn't even aware I was doing something weird.
You kind of took on a Lancashire accent there, kind of near the end there, just a hint of one, barely perceptible.
If I could do that on command, I feel like I would be much better as a voice actor.
I used to know a guy who he could, within the same sentence, he would jump from Northern Irish to Southern Scottish to Northern British, just like within the same sentence, and he would do it like just to mess with people.
I know people like that.
Impressive.
Yep. All right, but we got a fun show for you guys tonight. Tonight we are calling back to an earlier episode. A few weeks ago, we did an episode about VR gaming, and the general consensus was that it was kind of a fad, that it wasn't really we didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. But things have happened in the last several weeks that I don't know about Skyler's, but certainly for me have caused me to do a complete 180. On my opinion of the subject. So we're doing a follow-up episode on our VR show. So this is the VR show part 2. And I know that Brian is going to come up with some god-awful VR Troopers pun to use for this episode's title.
I already used the first one. I'm not... VR Troopers only lasted 2 seasons. I don't have a lot to pull from.
All right. But of course, there is procedure to follow. So we're going to begin, as always, with the random topic of the week. And we're going to take a look at some of the responses we got from last week's topic, which was things that you find on TV just as your channel surfing that you're just going to stop and watch. And, you're not going to, you just can't flip through. You've got to stop and watch it. So we got a couple comments here from the YouTube. Claire CG is all about the How to Train Your Dragon. Says, if I know it's on, I'll be planning to watch it on TV, even though I have the DVDs and Blu-rays. I've even told work I had a really important event that I must be at on Boxing Day, so I was at home in time to watch the Freeview TV premiere of the second movie on BBC. All right, so okay, all right, definitely passionate about the How to Train Your Dragon. Too Groovy writes that some of the films that he can't flip through are the Back to the Future trilogy, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, the George Romero Dead films, which on a related note, rest in peace, George. They did cut the head off the body, right? Just to make sure he's dead. Because if anyone's going to come back as a zombie, it's going to be him. So, and for television shows, he writes Gravity Falls, Milo Murphy's Law, and almost any incarnation of Scooby-Doo. So he must spend a lot of time on Boomerang. So, yeah, and then in the email, we have got, let's see, Jerry, who writes that he cannot flip through Cowboy Bebop or any 90s anime. Let's see, another one here from Sarah, and her big thing is old Disney cartoon stuff like Gummy Bears, DuckTales, Bonkers. Oh, my God, I thought I was the only one on this world who remembered Bonkers.
No, my other half's got the entire series downloaded.
Oh my God.
So there are 3 of you.
Yep.
And let's see. Here's one that, again, another one that I thought that I was the only one who remembered this. And this one comes from Paul. And he says that if he's surfing through, this is a YouTube one, he says if he's surfing through YouTube and he finds an uploaded video of the old Barnyard Commandos cartoon, he drops whatever he's doing and stops and watches it. I thought I was the only person on this earth who remembered Barnyard Commandos. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Barnyard Commandos, it's one of those cartoons that's so that's proof that everyone was on drugs in the 80s. Because the premise is a war between sheeps and pigs on this farm, and it was based on a toy line in the 80s, so you had like, you know, helicopters made out of 2x4s and machine guns that shot, you know, sun-dried tomatoes, and it was just really weird series. Like, I just barely remember it, but yeah, it was a thing, and this guy apparently just can't resist it. So okay, so we got some really good response for last week's topic. So for this week's topic, let's see. I didn't come up with a topic for this week. Well, let's talk about probably the biggest news that's come out over the last couple of days, and that's the announcement of the new Doctor Who. Jodie Whittaker has been announced as the 13th Doctor, going to be picking up from Peter Capaldi, and it's definitely caught a lot of people by surprise. So let's kind of do a quick roundtable and kind of talk about what our thoughts on this are. So Skyblaze, as the chief Whovian among us, what are your thoughts on this?
I've seen so much shit being flung around about this. It's just kind of made me want to bang my head against a table until I fall unconscious.
Well,
some of the stupidity has been absolutely fucking blinding. But when you get right down to it, Doctor Who is a show that's about giving people a chance and about exploring and thinking your way past things and being more about brains than brawn. And the fact that it was a male character doing this says a lot. Becoming a woman? Okay, that's a really interesting way of what a direction that they're taking it in, and it could be awesome. I know very little about the actress. I haven't seen her in a great deal. I'm told that she's very good. My concern is that they're going to write her as the female Doctor instead of the Doctor who happens to be female. Especially considering that it's Chris Chibnall who's going to be in charge, and he does not have a good reputation when it comes to writing female characters.
Okay, now here's where I thought, because this is something I've been wanting to ask you about for a while. Because in the past, when Chris Chibnall's name has come up, it's been almost like a Pavlovian response with you. You've just lost your mind about it. And I got curious a while back, and I went looking to find out what exactly he had done, and like I couldn't find anything.
Cyberwoman.
Huh?
Cyberwoman.
From Torchwood?
Torchwood. That's his.
Okay, I'm gonna smile and nod at that, because I've never seen that. I've heard about the episode, but I never saw it. But I even went on Tumblr to look for. I searched Chris Chibnall sexist on Tumblr, and if there's any place on the internet that's gonna call somebody out on sexism, it's Tumblr, and I couldn't find anything. So I was like, all right, I just got to ask, what is it about Chris Chibnall that just sets you off? But apparently that's the answer to the Cyberwoman episode.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Because I couldn't. It just like I said, it's just something I wanted to ask you about for a while. Brian.
Yeah, it's just mostly that.
Okay. All right. Because my first instinct was, I thought back to the discussion we had about dinosaurs on a spaceship, and I was like, well, okay, I could see how he wrote Cleopatra in that episode, raising some eyebrows, but I don't see that being enough.
That was a little bit kind of like, you could have done that better, but it's mostly Cyberwoman and the way that the title character is treated in that. It's just, and oh god, it was embarrassing. It was just cringeworthy, embarrassing. Oh my god, what are you doing? And the moment where Torchwood kind of lost all respect it could possibly have had from me.
Okay, well, I think we'll see what happens with Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker.
Oh yeah, it's not going to stop me watching at all, but it's just okay, prove me wrong.
Okay, Brian, what about you? What are your thoughts? Are you looking forward to the new Doctor?
I'm so behind on the current Doctor Who. I'm not even sure exactly what will happen with me. I unfortunately, and this I felt bad because when the announcement came up, I was like, who? Because I don't watch, like everyone mentioned Broadchurch. I was like, I didn't watch Broadchurch. Then I had to go back on, she's got to be in something I've watched. Attack the Block. Okay, yeah, she was in Attack the Block. I went, I don't remember Attack the Block. So for me, it's going to be great because it's going to be a blank slate. And like, I can't wait to see what she does, you know?
Okay. I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I'm still the last episode of Doctor Who that I watched was actually the one with Davros on his deathbed, and then shit just blew up in my life, and I just haven't been able to catch up since then. So I've got a lot to catch up on.
You don't say.
Yeah, but
the finale of this season is a fucking doozy.
So I've been told, despite my best efforts to avoid any kind of spoilers. So but you know, like anything else, I'm withholding judgment until I see what's been placed in front of me. Because at this stage, you know, what's going to happen right now, the only thing that is before us is pure speculation. So I was like, all right, you know, let's just see where this goes. Let's see what happens. I honestly, I mean, I don't know. Going back to talking about Chris Chibnall, I don't know anything about what he's done except for the odd Doctor Who episode he's written in the last couple seasons. So, I mean, you know, for what it's worth, I enjoyed Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. I haven't seen any of Torchwood, so I can't really speak to what he's done there. So, you know, I don't know. I'm kind of going in with a blank slate on it. Just like, all right, you know, let's see what you got. So I do hope that he doesn't recycle stories as much as Stephen Moffat did. Holy Christ. So, but you know, we'll see what happens. But anyway, sound off in the comments. What are your thoughts on the new Doctor Who? Are you excited? Are you afraid? Do you not care either way? Let's hear from you guys. And with that, we're going to launch right into our Ask a Geek. And I want to make apologies to Ben, who his question was actually what we all thought of the new Doctor. So sorry to preempt you there, Ben. So let's see. We've got a question here from Laura. And she asked me two questions. One, what do I think of the new Castlevania series? To which I say, you're going to have to wait a week to get my opinion on that, because that's actually our discussion topic next week, is the Castlevania series. That was put in by executive fiat. I was like, we're gonna do an episode on this, and I don't want to hear any argument from anybody. Which I guess that gives you an idea of where my opinion might lie. But you'll get the full details on that in our next episode. And then her second question is, what is my favorite Castlevania game? And that's a bit of a toughie. Okay, I'm gonna remove the Lords of Shadow continuity from this answer, and I'm going to give two. And the first answer is going to be the old school level-based Castlevania, and then the second is going to be my favorite Metroidvania Castlevania game. For old school Castlevania, it's a tie between Super Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo and Rondo of Blood, as it was released in English on the PSP in the Dracula X Chronicles. Super Castlevania 4 I like because of the gameplay. I like the fact that you can actually whip in other directions beyond just straightforward. So, you know, it's a little easier to defend yourself against the game's punishing difficulty. And Rondo of Blood I like for the story, because it forms a neat little two-part arc with my favorite Metroidvania title, which is Symphony of the Night. That's a game that I will fire up at least once a year. I may not beat it. I usually don't play it all the way through, but I'll fire that up once a year just to play it. It's just there's every time I play that game, I discover something new, whether it's a new part of the castle that I hadn't seen before, or some new little detail in the sprite work that I didn't notice before. I maintain that Symphony of the Night has some of the best sprite animation in games ever. Everything is just so fluid and pretty to look at, and there's all these neat little details and how the characters and the monsters move. And like I said, I always discover something new. And so I'd say Symphony of the Night is Symphony of the Night, Super Castlevania 4, and Rondo of Blood are my favorite Castlevania games. So Brian, Skybows, what about you? Do you have anything to add? Any Castlevania games? Are you guys Castlevania fans at all? I don't recall.
I've played some of them. I actually quite like Castlevania Bloodlines, despite the fact that it was cut to ribbons in the West. But I like the gameplay. Symphony of the Night is amazing. I haven't played a lot of it, and I don't have a copy of it anymore. It got stolen.
Well, you've got a PS4, don't you?
I do.
You can actually buy it on PSN.
But yeah, my original copy of it got stolen. Unfortunately, I couldn't get hold of a replacement. I should probably get hold of it again. I quite liked Lords of Shadow.
I did too. The only reason I removed it from my answer was just to keep from muddying up my thought process. And I can see why why people might not have enjoyed Lords of Shadow 2 as much, because there were a lot of design decisions made with that game that I wouldn't have done.
The inexplicable pseudo stealth sections spring to mind. It's like, why the fuck are you doing this?
I was like, look, okay, I love Space Marines as much as anybody else, but I'm playing the fucking Lord of Darkness. I should be able to rip these people in two and floss my teeth with their entrails.
Pretty much.
So, but like, you know, they are very different games from what came before. And so I can see why people might not like them as much as, you know, the previous titles.
Certainly, but on their own merits, they are fine. As a Castlevania game, they're okay. Story-wise, I like them.
Oh god, story-wise, they're great. The first, the especially the ending of the first one. Oh my god, like that was like
there's a lot of action. There's a lot of tragedy. The voice acting is superb.
And it's just one wham moment after the other. Oh my god. Patrick Stewart's the villain on. Oh no, he's not the villain. Fucking Satan's the villain.
I know, right?
And then, okay, Satan's dead. Okay, there's this long epilogue. What's going on? Oh shit, are those cars? Are we in modern times? What's happening? So
who the fuck knows?
All right, Brian. What about you? Are you a Castlevania fan at all? Anything to add to this question?
I've really never played the games, to be honest with you guys. Not for the lack of trying, just never really came across.
They are not easy games. They do make you work for your enjoyment. All right, and let's see here now. I got a question actually here for you, Brian, and this one, the name just says Miller, and they asked, "Are you looking forward to San Diego Comic-Con this year?"
We were actually talking about that before we started really recording, and I was trying to check up on like news that may be coming out of it. And I just haven't been seeing a lot of stuff from almost anyone, really. And so I won't say I'll be disappointed, because I'm sure something will be announced that will excite me. But right now, I'm just not really seeing anything, and especially since they announced a lot of the Avengers stuff at the Disney D23 convention, which I thought would have been saved for the Comic-Con Hall H presentation, unless they're saving footage for it. So I don't know. I mean, it's really up in the air this year. If anything, if I'm excited for really anything.
Do you think the reason why Disney had all their Marvel stuff done during their own conference is so that they'd have all eyes on them and not have to compete with all the other stuff at Comic-Con?
Possibly. I mean, there's a possibility of that, since it is their convention and it is their stuff, and they had a lot of, because they had that, they had sizzle reel for the Star Wars movies. They showed the what the Star Wars park is going to look like in Disneyland. I think they just wanted to have all of that there with under their own terms and rules, and that makes perfect sense, really.
Yeah, because this is something you and I have discussed on past Comic-Con shows, just how crowded everything is and how it's just a flood of major announcements, and it's hard to keep track of anything. So I was wondering if maybe this D23 con was a sort of a reaction to that.
No, they've always had something like this. I think this is like the first. I wouldn't say the first year, but this is where they definitely have a lot of major traction going on, because it doesn't feel just Disney. It's Disney and Marvel and Star Wars, you know. So it's a lot of bigger names involved. Because beforehand it was just, this is the D23. This is what we're doing for some of our films later. This is what we're going to do for some of our parks. And it was very sort of laid back, but definitely the last couple of years, they're like, look at all this crazy stuff we have. So there is a sense of, hey, we already have this convention going on. Let's use it for us, and we get the spotlight on our things, and not really have to worry about elbowing people around Hall H.
Okay. Alrighty. And that's about all the Ask a Geek questions that we have for this week. As always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdofthethirdpower.com, or you can drop them in the comment section of our YouTube feed. We do occasionally do a troll through our YouTube to catch questions from there. And with that, we're going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of this discussion. And to give people who are just joining us here a recap, a few weeks ago, I purchased an Oculus Rift and decided that we were going to do a show on VR gaming. And at that time, the Oculus Touch hadn't come out. The Vive had just come out with its controllers. PlayStation VR, I think, had just come out at the time. So there wasn't really a whole lot to the landscape for us to really examine in VR gaming. And we all kind of decided, well, yeah, you know what? Unless they do something really out there with this, then this is just going to be a fad. Fast forward to today, and since then we've had the Oculus Touch come out. We've had a whole lot of new stuff come out as far as VR gaming. With the PlayStation VR has taken off, and there's a lot more meat on the table now for us to examine. So we decided that we were going to do a follow-up episode on this and kind of re-examine our thoughts on VR games and see what we think the future might be. And Skyblaze, you've actually have a somewhat unique position to examine this from.
I do. In February of this year, I was employed by VR Focus, who are a website dedicated to VR news and games. So I now work as a staff writer and journalist for VR. I now also own a PlayStation VR. So yeah.
Now, did you pick up the X-Wing flight simulator?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. All right. That's probably going to be the first thing that I pick up when I get a PlayStation VR. So being able to see the VR gaming from sort of an industry angle, how do you see the landscape right now?
We're at this kind of tipping point where nearly all of the early adopters have got it now. And it's now starting to kind of get to that tipping point where everybody else is starting to get hold of it. This is the point where it will either become mainstream or it won't. Considering that it's mostly games that are driving it, but it's not just games that are growing the industry. It's also a lot of industrial and commercial use,
and some educational. I was actually reading an article. Yeah. I think it's the same. It's about a year, so it's a few months old. So I think it's actually the same one that I talked about in our last VR episode. But there's a couple medical schools that are installing VR-ready computers in their labs to help teach anatomy, so that their students can actually examine a virtual cadaver to get a close look at the various organs, ligaments, and tendons that they're studying in the class that day.
It goes further than that. There was an article I posted today, and this is so utterly ridiculous that my brain just exploded. It was Ericsson and BT and a VR content producer called what are they called? Room One, I think. Were live streaming a virtual examination of I think it was a liver, and everybody who was watching were not only wearing VR headsets so they could see it from the surgeon's perspective, because the surgeon was wearing a head-mounted camera, but the surgeon was also wearing haptic gloves, haptic sensors, and everybody watching was wearing haptic gloves as well, so they could feel exactly what was going on as well as see it.
Oh God!
I know, right?
I would need just like the biggest of barf buckets. Like No, just like the thing, like, and here's what's weird about medical stuff for me. Like, I can watch an action movie and watch someone get blown up with a grenade and have their intestines splayed all over the place and be totally fine. But if you put a video of like open heart surgery in front of me, like, you could use me as a power washer. I'm vomiting so hard. But then, like, to have to feel it, just like, oh, it gives me the ghiblis.
But there's also it's a French company who makes tiny commercial planes. What the hell were they called? I've forgotten.
I think those are called drones.
No. As in, people actually sit in them, and they're just kind of like small for about 14 people, that sort of thing. And in order to train new mechanics, and they were like, well, we could just teach basically one person at a time because that's all that would fit inside this tiny area of the plane where we put all the electronics. Or we could film the inside of the goddamn plane and then put it on a VR headset so 20 people can see it at the same time. And, have motion control so they can actually move around and find out what piece does what. Brilliant. Well done. That sounds good.
Yeah. Kind of leaping off of that, I've got a list of VR software that I've been playing with over the past several weeks. I'm going to talk about in this episode, and this kind of segues in the first one. I picked up a Apollo 11 VR landing simulator off of Steam off the last summer sale, and it basically it takes you through the whole Apollo 11 mission from liftoff to landing on the moon, to watching Neil Armstrong plant the flag, to the lander returning to the module returning to Earth, and it's all mixed in with commentary and audio commentary from the people who are actually on the mission, and audio clips, like you got to hear the phone call from Richard Nixon to the astronauts on the moon, to John F. Kennedy's speech saying that they were going to be on the moon before the end of the decade. And to be able to experience this even virtually was certainly one of the most profound gaming experiences I've had in my life. Because you're sitting there in the Apollo 11 module, and you look to your right, and there's Buzz fucking Aldrin, modeled exactly as he looked in those days, and all the dials and knobs on the board are accurate to the actual NASA module. I just played it through observer mode, but there's actually mode where you can actually, perform the docking maneuver to pull the lander out of the rocket and actually perform the landing on the moon. But to just be able to just look around, it got to the point where it's I was so into it that I was actually moving around in my chair as if I was actually in the lander, just to get a look out the window to look down at the moon. I was like, oh man. So, I honestly see more stuff like this becoming common in the future, just being able to experience historical events in a VR environment and actually get to see how these events played out from the perspective of someone who actually had boots on the ground when this stuff was happening. And I'm really excited to see more stuff like that. Yes. So
I agree.
So it's interesting that there have been so many applications of this kind of hardware outside of gaming. So I think that even if if just the gaming scene doesn't take off for virtual reality, I think we're definitely going to see some more out of the box applications. I'll tell you something that I think we are going to see become really common with virtual reality: driving instruction.
Oh, that's already happening. Driving instruction. Well, if you look at things like pilot instruction, that's been using a crude version of VR in terms of simulation for decades.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my father, who's in the Air Force, he actually said that they've been using a sort of limited form of VR to train their pilots since the late 90s even.
Yeah.
So
it's also it was only today that it got announced. Actually, Google have relaunched Google Glass as a enterprise edition for businesses. So basically, use it as a heads-up display for various business applications.
Okay. Have they made it look any less ridiculous to wear?
Yeah, it looks basically like safety glasses.
Oh, okay. Because I remember the first model. It just looked like the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Let me call up. There we go.
Okay.
So
right.
they look more like safety glasses now. It's a different form factor. It's got better battery life, and there's a little red indicator light that shows you whenever it's recording.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah. That now. I wonder if I can get it in a prescription model, but one step at a time.
Allegedly, that's coming, supposedly.
Oh, okay. Brian, you've been rather quiet. Anything to add or any questions, comments?
I mean, not really. Nothing really for me personally has changed since the last VR show we sort of talked about. I know there's like all sorts of technology coming from it. Different games are being developed for it, but nothing has stood out to me as the common man. I don't know why I said it like that, but to make me go, all right, I will buy into this, or I will finally sit down and purchase something VR or move forward. It's not like it's not gimmick to me. I see where it could go, where the technology is definitely bridging, but then I see, people playing VR games online, and all they're really doing is just grabbing stuff and throwing it to the side of the room. And like, well, I guess that's kind of cool, but nothing again just doesn't make me go, man, I need to buy this stuff now. Like nothing has jumped at me for that yet. Like what do you think? I'll ask you this question. What do you think would work for someone like me, Mr. Not really sure about it, to get me into it, to make me go, all right, I can see this?
All right. Well, given what I know about you, I think that what would get you into it would be the same thing that I've been saying for a while, a real honest-to-God sci-fi flight simulator, where you can actually manipulate the stick and manipulate the buttons and knobs and actually adjust the power settings of your bird. Or failing that, something that would actually let you simulate being a Marvel comic character like, say, Spider-Man or Iron Man. I think that if they came out with an Iron Man simulator and actually did it well, I think that would be right up your alley.
Well, there's you've mentioned two things that is interesting. So there is, I think, a Spider-Man Homecoming. I don't think it's a VR game or anything like that. Maybe it is a game, a small demo.
It's a game, but it's a brief one.
It's a brief one. Okay, so there is something.
There's also they announced it at the whatever the hell it's called, the Marvel Disney thing. They are bringing out a game called Marvel Powers United VR. What platform is it for? Oculus Rift, I think. Mm-hmm. Will be released in 2018. There's apparently going to be a demo at San Diego Comic-Con. And it's going to have cooperative multiplayer that allows up to 4 people to basically become a Marvel superhero.
I mean, it sounds interesting, but again, it doesn't jump out. And what's so funny is you also mentioned the flight simulator. Now, something that did pique my interest, but I'm not sure it would still get me into full into it, was I did see video about the Starship Bridge simulator. Or Star Trek, Crew. Yeah, Star Trek Bridge Crew. Thank you.
Which
that's fascinating.
There was 2 things I was going to mention. If I was going to get anybody into this, if you have played and enjoyed Elite Dangerous in VR with a full simulator rig, with all the sticks and everything.
Yeah, everyone. Go ahead. Sorry. I
have done this once, and it is amazing. And Elite Dangerous is not my game, and I still really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've been everyone that I've talked to who's played it, they've all told me the same thing. They said, Gonzo, you want an X-Wing simulator? Elite Dangerous is X-Wing just without the Star Wars license. Mm-hmm. That's what they've all told me. So I haven't picked it up yet, but I plan to. Bridge Crew is another one that I've wanted to pick up. And remind me, is that actually cross platform?
It's cross platform. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, you and I think are going to have to pick up on that and do a playthrough of that together and record it and record our observations, because that just looks cool as hell. Now I'll tell you some games.
Couple of interesting things about Bridge Crew that I just wanted to bring up. By all indications, the best experience for Bridge Crew is if you've got 4 people all playing together, cooperating, who all know each other and can work together. Then it becomes an amazing experience. Also, they have just introduced for Star Trek Bridge Crew IBM Watson natural language processing, so you can actually do the computer do this analysis and it will fucking do it.
Oh, neat.
I know, right?
Now I'll tell you about some VR games that I have picked up. I already mentioned the Apollo 11 VR, but I also picked up, to prepare for the discussion, I picked up Robo Recall, I picked up the Serious Sam, The Last Hope, and I picked up Arizona Sunshine and Rick and Morty Virtual Reality, which I want to start talking about the Rick and Morty game, which I would actually recommend as a sort of entry-level pickup for someone who's just getting into virtual reality gaming, because it's basically just one big sandbox. You're basically in Rick's lab in the garage of the Smith house from the show, and you're basically, you can fiddle around with all the dials and knobs in the lab, and there's some puzzles that you have to solve to advance the game's plot line, which it's the setup for one long brick joke that had me just rolling at the end. It was hysterical. The writing is straight out of the show. It feels like you're actually participating on the sidelines of an actual Rick and Morty episode. But it was something that it was really easy for me to get used to, actually moving around, not just in a virtual environment, but in actually getting used to playing VR games in a real world environment, because it helped me develop sort of my spatial awareness. Like, okay, all right, I can't move too far in this direction, because if I do, I'm going to bump into the lamp. Or if I don't kind of keep my footing and I go swinging my arms around, I might wind up putting my hand through my $1,500 television, and then that's it. I'm cashing my chips. Call a funeral home. You've got, so it's something that really allowed me to develop sort of my spatial awareness and get used to working with the Oculus Rift and the Oculus Rift Touch. So it's definitely something that I would recommend if you're just getting into VR and you want to kind of get used to dealing with objects in a virtual environment and developing your spatial awareness for playing VR in a room-sized setting. Robo Recall and Serious Sam, I'm just going to lump together because they're both the same basic games. They're shooting galleries, which they're arcade-style shooting galleries. You can actually play the classic Serious Sam games in VR. I didn't attempt that because, holy shit, fuck motion sickness. Not dealing with that. I will say I did try it. The Robo Recall and Arizona Sunshine, which I'll talk about in a moment, they both have a movement system that's based on teleportation, which is you point your controller in the direction you want to go, and then it'll actually give you a little indicator of where you're going to teleport to and which direction you'll be facing when you come out of it. And I thought that was going to be the clunkiest thing in the world to deal with, but after a while, it actually became really intuitive. And I was able to move around really quickly without getting motion sickness. Now, you can play these Serious Sam and Arizona Sunshine. They both come with it natively. Robo Recall, you need to put it in as a mod, but you can actually play it with continuous movement, which is you push the control stick forward and you start moving forward. I tried that, and I didn't get motion sickness because I was standing up, but I did discover a new problem, which is that when I was moving forward, I'd unconsciously start leaning forward as if I was actually walking, and I'd have to stop and catch myself, and I'd do the same thing if I was moving backwards. So, because, I mean, we basically walk by falling in the direction that we want to go and catching ourselves with our feet. So every time I was moving forward in the game, I'd start leaning
How
forward.
the hell do you walk, dude?
Huh?
So how the hell do you walk, dude?
That's how a physics professor has explained it to me.
Fair enough.
So it sounds weird because we walk all our well, most of us, we walk all our lives. It's not even something we think about anymore. It's the centipede's dilemma. It's like, okay, we walk everywhere we want to go, but how does this mechanically actually work? So so that was the thing. Is like, I'd start leaning forward, but I'm not actually stepping. So my body's like, okay, we're moving forward, but we're not actually moving anything. What's going on? And now I'm face down in the floor. So I stuck with the teleportation system. And Arizona Sunshine is a zombie shooter, which I would call that sort of kind of a mechanically a combination of the arcade shooter of Robo Recall and the sandbox of Rick and Morty, because in addition to having to shoot the zombies, you've actually got to move around and open up drawers and cabinets to find keys and food to heal yourself and ammunition. And I discovered something that's really fucking irritating, and it's a problem that I only had with Arizona Sunshine and not really with Robo Recall and Serious Sam, because they deal with their gun physics in a different way. I know how to shoot a handgun. I own a 1911 Colt 45 replica that it's a replica of a World War II Colt 45 that I take target shooting every month. And I'm pretty accurate with it. I know how to aim down iron sights, and I can put my rounds in the head of the target, at 50 yards. I'm a pretty decent shot. I know how to handle a weapon. Arizona Sunshine, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. I can't hit a goddamn thing in this game. And I was just talking with Skyblaze about this before we started showing, and I mentioned how it's sort of a new version of the Guitar Hero problem, where someone who actually knows how to play a guitar, if they pick up a guitar, they have to unlearn all the things that they learned about playing guitar, because the skill set doesn't translate. And that's sort of the same problem that I'm having with Arizona Sunshine, is the skill set that I developed actually target shooting doesn't translate well into the game. And part of the issue that I have with it is that, and I'm hoping I'm explaining this right, the distance between the iron sights of the pistol and my eye is like half an arm's length longer than it is in real life. And I think, Skyblaze, you actually mentioned that that's because of how the game maps itself to the display.
Yeah, because purely due to the way that it works, in order to maintain equal distance, a lot of VR games will essentially map themselves to a kind of like slightly distorted sphere. And it tends to distort things slightly. Not all games do it, but quite a lot of them do. And so to do with that, it fucks up the physics a little bit. There's also some stuff to do with things like 2-to-1 mapping and things like that, which I'm not going to go into because it's actually quite boring.
So, but now once I adjusted to how the game handles gun physics, I mean, I had a great time with it. I absolutely loved it. And can I tell you, the sections of the game where you actually have to go down into an abandoned mine and you're in the dark and you've got a gun in one hand and a flashlight in the other, and you've actually got to like look around corners and shit can actually come out of the dark and jump at you. That's some of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had in gaming. Like, it was the immersion level was just through the charts, and it's also why when I finally pick up Resident Evil 7, I absolutely will not be playing it in VR.
I was gonna say.
Because I'm already ready to have I'm playing through Arizona Sunshine, and I'm already getting ready to have a heart attack in these dark environments. I play Resident Evil 7 in VR. I'm going to do something shameful in my pants. That's going to happen. I'm not that brave. And then I'm hearing.
I'm gonna, if that's okay, I'm gonna talk about a couple of games that have particularly impressed me on PlayStation VR.
Please do. Maybe there'll be some things that I'll pick up.
VR does quite well with puzzle games. Part of that's because VR content is still in its pretty early days at the moment. A lot of developers are still experimenting with what's possible in the game, and a lot of the tools that are being used to create VR are still fairly early stages. Puzzle games are actually pretty easy to do, and VR tends to take to them fairly well for whatever reason. There is a game on the PlayStation VR called Static, Statik, Static. And the basic premise is that you have your hand stuck in a box, and all the various different sides of the box have like little gizmos and switches and dials and various other bits and pieces, and you have to solve a puzzle.
So it's the fidget cube from hell.
Pretty much. But all of the various different like buttons and dials and switches and so on correspond to buttons on the DualShock controller. So essentially the puzzle box is the DualShock controller, which makes things so incredibly immersive. It's actually kind of weird. And you are being monitored by this scientist guy who, well, frankly, he's a human male version of GLaDOS from Portal. And he kind of like makes these weird comments, and he does like really annoying things, like he will cough or noisily slurp his coffee or like click his pen, and you're like, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to solve this puzzle, piss off. And you forget that he's not real dude.
When I get my hand out of this box, I'm going to take that pen and I'm going to shove it in your goddamn eye.
Pretty much. But it's deeply satisfying to do this and to like have this like little fidget cube thing going on. And the narrative as such is very subtle, but it's actually pretty interesting. And when you do kind of like solve all the puzzles and get all the extras in the way that it wants you to do it, and you find out what the actual ending is, and it's like, oh fuck. It's great. It's quite short. It's only a few hours, but it's so much fun to play. It's definitely worth it if you happen to have a PSVR. Definitely worth it. The other game I wanted to mention, and it's one that's actually shown up fairly recently in a Nine Inch Nails music video of all things, is Polybius. It's a game by Llamasoft, and a developer whose name might be familiar to some of you listening, Jeff Minter. It's basically a shooter in the sense of you have a tiny ship at the bottom of the screen, and you move it side to side through a tunnel, and you shoot things. But if you have ever wondered what it is like to go on a 3-day drug bender, this is the game for you. It is the most neon bright, mind-bending experience I have ever had. I mean, I have been drunk as a skunk, and I have not felt as disoriented as I did when I took off the VR headset after playing this game, and suddenly the real world was there again. I was like, what the fuck? Holy shit, this game.
Okay.
It is trippy as piss, and it's really fun to play.
All right. So we're kind of running along here. So Brian, do you have any questions, comments to add at this juncture?
I mean, nothing's really coming to mind. I'm just sorry, like I don't have a lot to add to this sort of episode. I'm the weird odd man out and third wheel here.
Okay. All right.
Just wait till the price drops some more for VR kit, and you'll be able to afford it.
And that could be it too. Yeah.
And that brings us to the elephant in the room, and that's the one thing that I haven't changed my opinion on as far as VR gaming goes, and that's the barrier for entry is still ridiculously high.
Absolutely.
To you talk about like just the Oculus Rift, just the base unit is $600.
It's
okay,
not anymore.
you think that's
They literally just dropped it a couple of days ago. It's now $400.
Is that for the base unit, or is that for the base unit and the
Rift and Touch? It's now $400 until the end of September.
Okay. So all right. So right now it's $400. Okay. I mean, that's the cost of a console right there. Then you add in the fact that just to even use this, you've got to have a machine that is ridiculously powerful if you want it to run smoothly. Like I mentioned this in the last episode, my machine, the Beast, that I do all my gaming on, all my PC gaming on, I'm just crunching the numbers in my head. It probably costs about $1,800 to get this machine to the level that it's at right now. Now, granted, since our first episode, I've made some upgrades. I upgraded my graphics card from a 4 gig 980 to an 8 gig 1080. So, that's the numbers are inflated a little bit from our first episode. But that's not money that in this economy a lot of people just have lying around. So I think that until they find some way to make the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive a little more affordable and easier to get into, the only VR set that I see really taking off is the PlayStation VR, because the barrier for entry for that is just so much lower than it is for the Oculus Rift or for the HTC Vive.
It's also interesting that recently Oculus and HTC Vive have both announced that they are intending to produce standalone wireless headsets that don't need separate PCs or smartphones, that would kind of fit in between the high-end PC headsets and mobile phone VR. They're kind of going to sit in that area,
so like
which is pretty interesting.
It's like a mid-range VR headset. Okay.
Yeah. Which might actually
talk about cars. There's a high car. There's a mid-range sedan.
Yeah, but it also means that gives people an option who, mobile VR is pretty nice and it's got a couple of really, really cool things, but it's not giving you the same level of experience. Okay, maybe I'll upgrade to one of these standalone headsets, see what that's like.
Okay, all right. So maybe when that comes around, maybe then, Brian, you'll have something that you can pick up and take a look at.
You never know.
So, all right. So, like I said, we're running a bit long, but one thing that I kind of asked, what are some games that you think would do well in VR, or some things that you'd like to see VR do? So, Skyplanes, let's start with you. What is something you'd like to see done with VR? Or what's a property that you think would make a good VR game?
Everybody's still waiting for the Star Wars swing a lightsaber around game. Everybody is waiting.
Well, that brings us back to the Guitar Hero problem, and something that actually I discussed with you before we started the show. Yeah. You're actually a trained fencer. Mm-hmm. And I see you picking up a lightsaber game and having the kind of similar issue to what I had, which is like, with a sword, you swing it, you hit something, you get the feedback from the impact. Your swing actually stops. Do you see yourself having that kind of problem when you swing a sword and you don't get that feedback from the impact?
It is a problem, and there are a couple of tricks you can do to overcome that issue. There are some bits that you can do with haptics and so on, but it is a problem. Until we get Star Trek style holodecks, that's going to continue to be a problem. So there are a couple of tricks you can use to overcome that, but I still think that people are going to want to play it if they manage to pull it off. It's going to be pretty interesting to see. The other thing is already happening is the VR arcades that are starting to open up. Yeah, if you don't have a high-powered PC at home, you just go to the local VR arcade and you play on that for half an hour.
You see, I don't see standalone VR arcades becoming a major thing. Now, I do see places like I don't know if you have them in the UK, but we got a chain over here called Dave and Buster's, which is basically like an arcade for adults. I could see maybe those places having like a VR wing.
They're already opening. There's already a few. IMAX, of all places, IMAX cinemas are starting to open VR arcades as part of like a subset of the IMAX cinema.
Interesting.
Mm.
Okay. Well, for me, a game that I think would do really well with a VR version, and I know that Brian is just going to roll his eyes at me when I say this, but I think a VR version of the first Five Nights at Freddy's game.
For the love of let the franchise die.
would be great. Like, like actually having to pick up the iPad and flip through the camera displays and actually having to slam the door shut yourself would be just a very immersive and very terrifying experience. The first game is the only one that I see that really working with, though. Maybe the third game. Second and fourth, I don't see really working very well. But we'll see. But like I said, I think a VR version of the first Five Nights at Freddy's would be amazing. And if that ever comes out, then I'm gonna buy some Depends and I'm gonna try it out because I know that's gonna make me vacate myself. But at that point,
VR,
like, you know what, it's worth it.
VR Wipeout.
Wipeout.
Yes, please. As in the futuristic racing game.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like the television show where it's basically Fear Factor on the water.
Yeah, we had it first. It was imported from the UK.
Yeah, okay.
But no,
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I guess. I always thought it was a silly show.
It is. I don't watch it. But it's quite often on, but just before Doctor Who. So, but yeah, the futuristic car racing game in VR. Yes, please. I'll have some.
I know the one she's talking about. That's a really good racing game.
Hell, how about just a decent NASCAR or Formula One racing simulator?
Well, Gran Turismo is coming out in VR later this year.
And we will never see Skyblades again when it does. I'm calling it now.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Alrighty. All right. So like I said, that's about all the time that we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. So I can definitely say that I think we definitely see a future in VR, not just in gaming, but just as a technology. I think it's safe to say that there's definitely a future here.
I would say so. I also certainly hope so, since it's kind of my job security.
So she's a little biased.
She might
I am a tiny bit biased.
Yeah, it's only her bread and butter. Alrighty. But that's all the time we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will see you next week for Castlevania, which I am really looking forward to. So yeah. We'll see you next week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm Skyblaze.
I'm Brian.
We will see you next week. Taka, play us out.